trauma fosters a shame-based view of the self.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk a little bit about shame, man, because that was a huge part of my life.
Well, tell me about it.
I just felt ashamed of myself.
Yeah.
I felt ashamed of I felt ashamed of how I looked. I felt ashamed of like my ears, my nose, my face, the way I stood. I felt, I felt ashamed of my family, of my home. Everything. I just felt a ton of it. I'm not whining about it right now. I'm just thinking back. But yeah, I just felt a ton of shame. You know, I think I felt ashamed of who I was at like the first molecule almost, like the first cell of my, the dirt under the roots. It felt like there was a part of me that I felt like I was me, or anything that had to do with me was gross.
I understand.
And I use the word gross because it felt like gross.
No, the only thing I'll say is it's not that you felt you were gross, it's you believed you were.
Right. Yes. You're right. I didn't feel it. It wasn't like a feeling on the surface of me.
Yeah.
It was like a knot someone had tied a long time ago in the beginning of my time. And in that knot, it was in there somewhere. And I couldn't really even access it. It was but shame. Yeah. I want to hear about shame. Did you feel it?
Oh yeah.
How'd you feel?
Well, growing up in Hungary, in Eastern Europe, and I lived there until I was 13, there was a lot of anti-Semitism. And my grandparents had died in Auschwitz. I almost died as an infant. My mother, my father.
That's when your mother gave you to someone else to save you?
That's right, yeah.
Wow.
When I was 11 months of age. But even after the war, there was anti-Semitism. And so I'd feel ashamed of being Jewish. I don't anymore, but I did as a kid. So I would I was ashamed of my Jewish looks.
Oh, so you have to hide, or you have to feel like,
yeah, there's something different about me that isn't quite right. And there was a lot of anti-Semitism and taunting in the school that I went to. When I look back on it now. So yeah, and then I developed body shame. To this day, it's interesting. But every day I judge aspects of my body.
Oh, yeah.
Like this is not big enough, or this is too big, or whatever,
Yeah, this is too big.
Yeah. So shame, but shame, nobody's born with shame.
Really?
No infant is born ashamed of themselves. They're totally there.
Yeah, that's true, huh? If you saw a little infant that was ashamed of himself, it would break your heart.
Yeah. No.
They wouldn't even know how to do it.
How infants get shamed is when they're not seen. And
what happens then?
Well, then, or if they're mistreated. Well, let's say a child is not seen, or worse, is being hurt. Now, they can make two assumptions. One is, these adults are stupid. They're incapable, they're incompetent. I'm all alone in the world. Or the child can believe there's something wrong with me, and maybe if I can work hard enough, I can fix it. Now, which belief do you think is more acceptable for the child?
The second one.
The second one. So then they develop this deep sense that there's something wrong with us. We just have to work hard enough or look good enough or something, and then maybe we can fix it. So even that shame, which comes out from being cut off from human contact, the way we need it, has a kind of protective value.
Really?
Because it makes us at least think that there's something we can do.
It gives us hope in a weird way.
It gives us hope in a weird way, yeah.
Wow.
But here's the thing. Children are narcissists. Young children. When I say narcissists, I don't mean in a pathological sense. I mean in the sense they think it's all about them.
Right. And they don't have any other choice. They're all they know.
That's all they know. So if the parents are happy and connected and there's an atmosphere of loving acceptance and so on, then the child thinks, hey, I must be pretty good. I must be
Yeah,
okay.
everything's good.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah. But if the parents are stressed, depressed, traumatized, racially challenged, economically challenged, or such terrible things as the children in Gaza are experiencing right now with the daily bombings and all this kind of stuff, what can they think? That there's something wrong with me.
Gabor, how does shame cause us to lose compassion for ourselves?
Yeah. Let me tell you a story. I mentioned this in The Myth of Normal. After my book on addiction came out, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, I got an email, a letter from a guy in Seattle. And he said, I really appreciate your book and showing how trauma causes, is one of the, not, addiction is not the only outcome of trauma, but it's one of the outcomes of trauma, one of the potential outcomes of trauma. And he said, I really appreciate all that. But he says, I can't blame my mother. It's my own fault that I'm a shit. And I thought, oh my God, you poor guy. You still see yourself that way? What lack of compassion. Because if he actually fully understood, that he was just a baby at some point, needing and wanting to be loved and held and seen and valued just for being a human being. And that didn't happen to him. And that caused so much pain in him that he escaped into some drug addiction. He's not a shit. He's just a hurt human being.
Yeah.
But that lack of self-compassion, I see it all the time in my workshops when I do therapy work with people. One of my main tasks is to help them to notice, not to criticize them for it, but to help them to be aware of how they lack compassion for themselves.
Yeah.
And
it's hard to even notice that you're getting in the shame circle. It's so hard to even notice that you're in it. And you could be living in the center of it.
yeah,
You know, that's how I was with self-pity. I was living it. I just didn't realize it. And the self-pity was manifesting itself like, oh, you can figure this out, you know? But by trying to constantly help myself figure it out, all I was doing was focusing on my own
right.
being not good enough.
Yeah.
Which in a way is really just self-pity.
But it's also lack of self-compassion.
Yeah. Not giving myself some grace. I remember the first time somebody said, hey man, give yourself some grace. I'd never even,
Wow.
I was like, wow.
Because people find themselves accusing themselves and talking to themselves in ways that they would never talk to others.
Yeah.
That most people wouldn't. You
Yeah.
know? Some would.
Yeah.
But most wouldn't.